Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the first session of our very first Surety Bonding for Contractors series. This is the first of 3 sessions. We have a lot coming your way today and next Wednesday and the following Wednesday. My name is Kristen Cordero. I am Deputy Director of Business Services at the Rhode Island Department of State under Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea. Speaking of whom, Secretary Gorbea wanted to be here tonight to welcome you all, and she was able to join us. So I'm going to invite her to give some welcoming remarks and let everybody know what's coming tonight. Secretary?
Buenas noches a todos. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be with all of you. As Kristen said, I'm your Secretary of State, Nellie Gorbea, and I'd like to welcome you to the very first session of our series, Surety Bonding for Contractors, Bond Readiness. I am very excited that my team in Business Services has partnered with the Rhode Island Builders Association to create resources like this. It really helps small businesses like yours grow and thrive right here in Rhode Island. We've got a lot of talent here in Rhode Island. Buenas noches, hola, soy su secretaria de Estado, Nellie Gorbea, y me gustaría darles la bienvenida a la primera sesión de nuestra serie de capacitación Fianzas para los contratistas, preparación acerca de fianzas. Eso es lo que decimos en inglés, Bonding for Contractors, Bond Readiness. Fianzas son los bonds. Estoy súper entusiasmada con mi equipo de la División de Servicios Comerciales, quienes han colaborado con la Asociación de Constructores de Rhode Island, el Rhode Island Builders Association, o RIBA por sus siglas en inglés, porque ellos están creando recursos como este, que les van a ayudar como pequeños negocios a crecer y prosperar aquí mismo en el estado de Rhode Island. I'm thrilled to say that this series is available in Spanish as well. And so if you would like to listen to our presenters with live interpretation, I will give instructions for that in Spanish in just a moment. Me da un inmenso placer el poder decir que esta sesión también está disponible en español. Si les gustaría escuchar a nuestros presentadores con interpretación directamente, les voy a dar unas instrucciones para hacerlo. Ok, lo primero que tienen que hacer es ir hacia abajo con su botón de la flechita esa donde pueden darle clic y darle clic al botón que dice Interpretation, interpretación. Elija Spanish o español en el menú desplegable. Entonces puede elegir Mute Original Audio. Eso quiere decir que así usted va a poder ver el presentador y los materiales de la presentación, pero va a escuchar la interpretación en directo al español, sin tener que oír el inglés, sin tener que tomar, hacer uno en inglés y después en español, como estamos haciendo ahora con mis palabras. Así que, si tiene cualquier problema, por favor, háganoslo saber en el chat. Y de ahí entonces le vamos a ayudar. Te voy a dar un minuto para que hagan eso, los que quieran hacerlo en español. Como dijimos, vamos a darle clic al botón que dice Interpretation, elija Spanish en el menú desplegable y elija Mute Original Audio. ¿Ok? Bueno. This series consists of 3 sessions, each of which will focus on a different topic, from helping you build an impressive portfolio and preparing to bid on available projects, to accessing the support your business needs to succeed. Whether you're a new business owner hoping to bid on a job for the first time, or you're an established contractor who wants to be ready for your next big contract, I think you'll learn a lot in this series. Esta serie consta de 3 sesiones. Cada una de ellas está enfocada en un tema diferente, desde cómo ayudarles a crear un portfolio impresionante y prepararse para licitar en proyectos disponibles, hasta cómo acceder al apoyo que necesita su negocio para lograr ser exitoso. Sin importar si usted es un nuevo propietario de negocio con esperanzas de licitar un trabajo por primera vez, o si usted es un contratista establecido que quiere estar preparado para su próximo gran contrato. Yo creo que usted va a poder aprender mucho sobre esta serie, o gracias a esta serie. Bueno, We'll be using this same Zoom link for all 3 sessions. So be sure to join us at the same time. Same place for the next 2 Wednesday evenings. Of course, if you're joining us live, you have the opportunity to ask questions throughout the sessions by typing them in the chat. If you can't join us live, that's okay. We hope that you'll contribute, we hope that you'll continue to reach out to see if you have any needs for support. My team is happy to help. We have so many resources, dedicated staff, and valuable partnerships to make sure that you get the help that you need. Vamos a utilizar el mismo enlace de Zoom, la misma dirección cibernética de Zoom para las 3 sesiones. Así que asegúrese de acompañarnos a la misma hora en el mismo sitio durante los próximos 2 miércoles por la tarde. Por supuesto, si nos acompaña en directo, ahora mismo en vivo, va a tener la oportunidad de hacernos preguntas durante la sesión utilizando el chat. Si usted no puede unirse ahora mismo en vivo, no se preocupe, estamos aquí para ayudarle. Así es que simplemente comuníquese con nosotros si tiene alguna pregunta o necesita alguna ayuda. Mi equipo está encantado de ayudarles. Estamos dispuestos para darle varios recursos, personal dedicado y vínculos valiosos para asegurarnos que usted reciba la ayuda necesaria. As I mentioned, this series was created in partnership with the Rhode Island Builders Association, my great friends over at REBA. And with that said, I want to turn it over to John Marcantonio, who's the CEO of the Rhode Island Builders Association, but not just yet, because I'm going to do this in Spanish as well. Como ya mencioné, esta serie fue creada en colaboración con mis gran amigos de la Asociación de Constructores de Rhode Island. La construcción es parte esencial de nuestra economía. Home building is an essential part of our economy. Y pues ahora por eso le quiero ceder la palabra a John Marcantonio, el director de la Asociación de Constructores de Rhode Island. Okay, John, now we're ready for you. John is on his iPhone. We're getting there. Oops.
Hi.
You're a little bit muffled. While John gets in and out, I think, because I think he has a bad connection. Let me see. Esta es la parte de como decimos, bailar tap en inglés. This is the tap dancing part of the session. John, why don't we do this? Why don't we go ahead to the presentation, and maybe you can give some words at the end.
I think that makes sense for, while we figure out some technical difficulties. Thank you so much.
In the world of Zoom. Thanks, Kristen. Buena suerte a todos.
Okay, we are going to get started with our first presenter today. Chuck Lowe with Builders Insurance Group is going to be taking us
to participate in this endeavor. We know confidence of those. Try to get into a different platform, perhaps.
Zoom land strikes again. All right. So Chuck Lowe is with Builders Insurance Group. He's going to be taking us through what surety companies are looking for when it comes to your application for bonds, some bonding basics. I think you will find him a dynamic and very talented speaker, and I will turn the floor over to Chuck. Please remember, any questions you have, if you'd like to ask in English or in Spanish, you can enter in the chat. We will be monitoring it actively, and we will make sure we get answers for you. We'll ask Chuck out loud, or we will answer them with resources that are at our disposal, whichever is more appropriate. But please do go ahead and submit those questions as you think of them. Chuck, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you, Secretary. This is it's a real honor for us to be invited to speak to you today. It's an important topic. We heard how important it is to our Secretary. And John, thanks for your comments. I know we'll be able to hear more from you at the end of the session. What we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to go over the different types of surety bonds, what they are, what they do, what's required to obtain one, and how you can start the process of finding out if this is something you want to get involved in, and ultimately how the application works. Slide, Chris. Okay, the first thing we want to talk about is that surety is not insurance. It is sure, it's sold by insurance companies, and sometimes the surety companies are owned by or are subsidiaries or divisions of insurance companies, but specifically it's not an insurance policy. I would really call it more of a financial guarantee, and specifically the process of obtaining a surety bond looks a lot more like an application for a loan. And you'll hear a little more about this as we get going. Slide. So, although there are many types of bonds that are used in the construction trades, tonight we're going to just specifically look at three types: a bid bond, a performance bond, and sometimes separately a payment bond. Yes, you may have already been involved in projects where you had to provide a license bond or a permit bond to open a road or hang a sign, something like that. But that's not really part of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're really going to focus on the construction performance bond process. Next slide. The bid bond. This might be the first one you've heard or been involved with as you've picked up some specs for a project. And they may talk about the fact that they want you to have a bid bond. Well, a bid bond is generally free. Sometimes the carriers, the bonding companies will make a modest charge for typing one up, but essentially it's free. And what it does is it assures that the bid that is being put in by the contractor is submitted in good faith, that he will enter into the contract at the price that he bid it, and that he will then provide the necessary performance and payment bonds that are required by these bid specs. Slide. Let's back up one, please. There we go. Okay, the big boy, the performance bond. The performance bond is really an agreement between three parties. The surety company. The surety company assures the project owner that the contractor will perform the contract in accordance with the documents that were laid out in those specs. Sometimes it may not be the project owner that's requiring the bond. It might be the general contractor that will require the subcontractors it's hiring to do the work in the project to assure the general contractor that the sub will, same thing, perform the contract in accordance with the documents. It's a guarantee. The surety company is guaranteeing that this is going to happen. Next slide. The payment bond, sometimes separate, sometimes made part of the performance bond, is the part of the performance bond or payment bond that says not only will you do the job, you're going to pay everyone that you've engaged to do the work with you. So that means you're going to pay your laborers, your suppliers, and all the people that provided materials to do this project. So the issue is, this is a guarantee. It's not like insurance where you walk into you buy property insurance. You know, the insurance company knows, well, there's a pretty good chance that, you know, something could happen. The wind could blow the shingles off your roof, lightning could strike your building could catch fire. These are all not expected to occur, but it's anticipated that these things could happen. So there could be claims involving it. Same thing with your automobile insurance. There might be a claim. You could get involved in an accident. Your vehicle could get, your windshield could break because a rock was kicked up. Those are situations where insurance expects that there will be claims and will pay them. In the event of a bond, a performance bond, and a performance and payment bond, and a bonding surety company will never enter into a situation where there is even the slightest chance they believe there'll be a claim. They will not issue a bond on that basis. It's a zero loss exchange, if you will, from the point of a surety bond underwriter. But bonds do get called and things happen. So what happens when that happens? The surety company has guaranteed the project owner or the GC that the work is going to be done and payments will be made. What happens when it doesn't? When this doesn't occur, the surety bond company then steps in, finds another contractor to complete the work that was done, or to pay the suppliers or laborers or employees that couldn't be paid because of the failure of the principal, the general contractor or the subcontractor to get the job done. They incur expenses in doing this, clearly, and money will have to be paid out both to the contractors, the suppliers, the laborers, the employees. And that money that is paid out will come from the contractor that applied and presented the bond to the owner. This is why it's not insurance. This is why this is not what occurs in an insurance transaction. This occurs in the case of a bond being called. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what happens and why you go through the process of what looks like applying for a loan even in order to obtain a performance and payment bond. Next slide. So what does a surety bond underwriter look for when reviewing an application for a bond? Well, okay, we talked about the fact that it's a financial guarantee. There's a number of things they're going to look at. We call it in the industry, we're going to call it the 3 C's. And actually there's even a 4th C, but we're going to start with the first couple. And the first C, slide please, is capital. The bond underwriter is going to look at the contractor and say, okay, who is this contractor? What's the story? Does he have the working capital to jump into a project and see the project through to completion? Does he have debt? What kind of equity does he have in his business? What are the projects he's done? Does he have, has he got a profitable history of doing projects that he's seen through to the very end? Has he made money doing this? What does it look like? Next slide. Capacity. Okay, what is his ability to perform the project? What work does he have on? Is he so busy with the work that he has on hand now that he doesn't have the freedom to work on new projects? What has he done on the projects that he's done before? What's his history? They're going to want to know about references. What are the 5 largest jobs you've completed in the past? And it doesn't really matter if these were bonded projects, because you may not have been involved in any public work that required bonds, but just what does your history look like? And what do your references say about you? Additionally, and this can come into play in the larger bonds, what are the continuity plans for the business? What plans are in place? If the principal of the project in this contracting company were taken out with a health issue, would the project go on? Are there people in place to see the project through? Are there other arrangements with other contractors to step in if something like this were to occur? So what's his capacity to do a project? Next slide, please. His credit.
Hey,
What
Chuck,
does, yes,
sorry, do you mind if I hop in with a question from the chat?
not at all.
Thank you. The question is, should the company include the potential contracts being awarded to qualify for the bonds?
They will look at not only the work you have on hand, but the projects you've also bid. Now, that doesn't mean you've won them as yet, but that will be part of what they're looking at. What kind of work do you have coming up down the pike? Yes.
Great, thank you.
Sure. And please, feel free to throw these questions out at any time. I'd rather take them when they're hot, but if you need to hold to hear if they're going to be answered down the road, that's okay too. So, okay. This can sometimes be the big question in everyone's mind. Okay, what do they want to know about my credit? Well, they're going to want to know everything. They're going to pull credit reports. They're going to want to know not only the credit reports for the corporation itself, excuse me, but they're going to look at the credit report for the owners of the company. They're going to look at the credit reports for any spouses of the owners of the company, so that they're really looking across the board to see what is the credit picture for this company. And you say, well, why would they care about the spouse? I've had bond requests that were turned down in the past because credit reports on the spouse of the principals of the company turned up liens that were there due to previous activities by them. And we actually had to research the liens, get them attended to, and were able to provide a performance bond for the company and for this project, based on the fact that we were able to square away some previous issues that had showed up in credit reports. So they really want to know, they really want to get to know this contractor well. And as it says here, character, reputation. Character is the 4th C. And honestly, it doesn't matter if it's a $50,000 bond, a $50 million bond. Character really matters. They want to know the reputation of the contractor. They want to know that they keep the promises that they make, that they deal fairly with the people that they work with, not just the people they work for, but the people that they work with, their employees, their suppliers, the vendors. It's not enough to pay your obligation. Well, yes, when you were dragged into court to pay it because you didn't have the funds at the time they were required. No, it's that those obligations were performed in a timely manner. And they look at your personal responsibility and character as just as much as they look at the corporate response. And I will also say, I did see a question come in, Kristen, if you want to throw it out. I didn't get to see the question, but I want to say that in smaller bond requests, credit is looked at very, very seriously. And oftentimes, the way the credit report reads will determine what kind of work you'll have to do to be able to obtain a performance bond. Kristen.
Yes, we have a multi-part question in the chat. So I'll ask the whole thing and then maybe we'll break it into smaller pieces. The whole question is, what is the threshold on the debt ratio? Is it similar to the SBA loans? And do surety companies request financials for all business partners regardless of the ownership percentage? So first question was, what's the threshold on the debt ratio? And is it similar to SBA loans?
I'm going to give you the insurance man answer, and that is that it varies. And it varies based on the surety companies. Okay, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but let's briefly look at it now. There are many, many, many surety companies out there. They're the ones that some of us have heard of, maybe because of advertising, and maybe you may have heard of Travelers or Liberty Mutual, companies like that. Well, those are the ones we may have heard of, but there's dozens and dozens and perhaps hundreds of surety companies out there, and they all have different approaches to the business. There are companies that want to only look at those people that are doing $50 million projects or doing 4 or 5 $50 million projects a year. So they want only the largest of the contractors. There's some that fall in the middle that say, well, we'll take the ones that may only do 2 or 3 a year, but we're very happy to look at those. They have different rules and requirements than one that will say, well, we'll take the newbie. We'll look at the one who this is their first shot or their first 1 or 2. And as such, because they're all different, they have very different ways of looking at your finances. They also have very different ways of verifying your finances. And by that, I mean, you'll hear more about it in the second part of the presentation from our CPA later. But essentially, when you provide financial reports, there are 3 levels. You'll see about it in a little bit, but there are different levels of reports to verify whether they're factual or not. So those things differ based upon who's looking at it. I think the last part of the question was, will they look at all the principals or owners of a company to look at if they're an officer of the company, most definitely they're going to be looking at that. Now, again, each situation that I've run across is slightly different based on the structure of that corporation. And so it'd really be hard to say there's a hard and fast rule, there's a hard and fast factor. I have seen debt to equity ratios, but I'm actually going to say, let's see what our CPA talks about from what his experience has been in presenting the information on the financial statements. I waltzed around that a bit, but it's primarily because there's no hard and fast rules. It's one set of rules for one carrier, another carrier may have a very different approach.
Thank you.
Hope that helps. Okay, let's see. Let's look at some interesting things. Next slide, please. Okay, what's the first steps? I will tell you what I experience most of the time, and then I'll tell you what I would like to experience. And I think it'd be the experience most of you folks would want to have. What I see first is you have a project you wish to take on that has a bond requirement. I'll answer the phone. Hey, Chuck. Hey, I got a bid that's due on Friday, and it's got this thing in it. There's a section there that's talking about they need a bond, and they need a bond as part of the bid. And my bid's going to be about $400,000. What's this thing going to cost me anyway? That's what I hear. I hear most bond requests start out just like that. Well, the issue is not what's it going to cost me. I can give a rough estimate of what it's going to cost you, but we're going to talk about the costs and the intricacies of that in a little bit. It really isn't what's it going to cost me, is it, can I get one? Maybe most of you folks know that, but really, we're really going to start with, am I bondable, and is this something I can get presented? Well, when you call me with that question, it's really the worst case scenario for someone trying to present or provide a bond for someone who's asked for one. There's almost never enough time. The financials are never in order that I can take and present to a bond underwriter to say, here's the guy that's looking for this $400,000 bond. He may not have the right type of financial statement. His bookkeeping may be not done on the right basis. Sometimes I've had people say, well, yeah, I've got financials. Here's my tax return. Well, very rarely is that something that's acceptable. It might be in a very, very, very small bond. But that's the first approach. That's the one I hear 90% of the time. Here's the approach I suggest that makes more sense, ends up with more favorable response, and really a much better experience for the contractor. And that is the approach that says, what size bond can I qualify for? It ends up eliminating a lot of the disappointment, the frustration. And when you're looking at it on this basis, generally we don't have the time constraints that we have that says, I've picked up this bond spec, it's got to be in by next Friday. Get this bond ready for me for then, can you? So let's talk and explore these ideas. Next slide, please. Well, I'm hoping by now, based on what we've talked about, that speaking with your accountant is probably more important as a first step than it is talking to your agent who wants to find ways to talk about how we're going to get you into a bonding situation. You really want to talk to an accountant. Again, the next presentation is going to be a CPA. But from an insurance and bonding perspective, for a guy who sells these things, here's why I think this is really important. You really want to align yourself with a CPA that works in construction, that is familiar with construction, that understands the contractor's needs, that understands the different accounting methods that may be required. Bonding companies want to see projects and contractors that do their books based on the percentage of completion. This might be old news to many of you folks, but for those that aren't, it's important because, as someone asked earlier, gee, if I'm bidding jobs, what do they want to know what other jobs I'm bidding? Well, they want to know where you are in your projects, where you are in the completion of the projects that you've got going. Where are you in the billing of all these things? There are different, I alluded to the fact that there are different types of financial statements. There are what's known as an audited statement, which is the most if you will, believable to bond underwriters. At the same time, they're a very thorough statement. It takes a long time to prepare, and it is a fairly expensive statement to end up undertaking. A reviewed statement is a statement, again, you'll hear more about this, but I'll just say it's less involved than an audited statement. And a compilation statement is simply one that takes, you hand the CPA your numbers and he puts them together for you. You'll hear more about this, but you really want to be talking to a CPA that works in this area. The other thing that's really big and that bond underwriters want to see is a bank line of credit. Well, I think it's essential to talk to an accountant that understands this, understands a bank line of credit where you're using 95% of it most of the time is really only a 5% line of credit. And that's not something that bond underwriters want to see. The other thing your accountant can do for you is a good one anyway, is going to understand the banks that are making loans to contractors and understand who is going to be more favorable, perhaps, to your request for a line of credit. Again, I'm not trying to steal anybody's thunder, but from a bonding point of view, your accountant's a critical piece of this. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about the project approach, which was the first one. I say, yeah, okay. I have to talk about it because 90% of bond requests come this way. So you really want to bring it to your agent first. He will have some information regarding where to go on the bond side of things, but you want to look at your agent first for a couple of reasons. One of which is this, he's going to give you some thoughts on the project based on the insurance paragraphs in that bid spec. I would say 50% of the time when somebody comes to me with a request like this to take a look at a contract, there is insufficient insurance limits to satisfy the requirements of the bid spec. So the first thing you want to know is, do you have insurance necessary to satisfy that? And if you don't, what does that mean? Well, you're going to have to get it. It means you're going to have to purchase it. Your insurance agent is going to have an opportunity to talk to you about what's it going to cost to add this. So there's going to be an expense in addition to the other parts of this bid spec. He's also going to be able to look at the bond requirements. Most agents that are working in the construction field of providing insurance know about bonds and know about the basics of what you're going to be required to, what hoops you're going to jump through to be able to get this bond. As you may have heard me say earlier, starting small is very important. Getting a $50,000 loan, if you will, is a lot easier than getting a $500,000 or a $5 million loan for most folks. So I just want to say starting small can work in your favor. So what happens? We get an idea of what it is you're looking at. We're going to put an application together that will be used to present to either a bonding company that most of us have access to many bond companies, or it may be the nature of this that it's specific enough or of a size that we go directly to a bond underwriting broker who has access to to the bulk of the bonding companies that are out there, because it makes good sense to match up a contractor with a bonding company. If you're a little contractor with a little need, we're not going to go to the biggest bonding companies out there that are looking for $50 million projects. It's a waste of all of our times. We're also going to try to gather what your basic financials are, because that also is going to be looked at. We're also going to be getting your date of birth, social security numbers for all of the principals in the corporation, because financial reports are going to be run on that basis, as I mentioned earlier, including the spouses. We're going to want to know if there's a bank line of credit, and we're going to want to know how much room is left on that bank line of credit. And I cannot emphasize strong enough that we have to allow time. If you can't walk in with your 3 years of financial statements in your hand, here, Chuck, here they are, ship this off to the bond underwriter. Oh no, well, geez, I got to wait a minute. I don't have this year's because my CPA hasn't put it together yet. Well, you can see how much time is going to be added to the process of getting you looked at to find out if we can even present an application to a bond underwriter with all the information they're looking for in the time frame that you've given us to get it done. Anything less than a couple of weeks is I will say, in many cases, virtually impossible. At least that's been our experience. On smaller bonds that can essentially be done with your credit reports, yes, we've had some success in putting things together in a hurry. But anything with any size, or what I'm going to say, hair on it, is going to require some underwriting. So the more time you have available to do this, the better off it's going to be. Now, doesn't that ring the bell that says let's qualify ahead of time? Because if your bonding limit is going to be, well, we'll do a $200,000 limit for you, and we'll allow 2 of those in the course of a year. Well, then you really don't want to be bidding that $500,000 job if it turns out that your limit right now, going to some of the best companies we can, is really going to be 200,000 with a 400,000 aggregate. So let's start first. Next slide, please.
Chuck, that actually was a great segue into a question we have in the chat, which
Sure.
is once you get approved to get a bond for a project, not pre-approval, do you need to reapply if you bid for another project?
Most definitely.
Yeah, so I think
That's why, again, Chris, yeah, your point, I'm sure, getting qualified ahead of time and knowing yeah, it's one thing to know a bond limit, but it's also another thing to know in aggregate how many can you do. And so that also absolutely comes into play.
Great. I will advance to the next slide.
Okay. Now, I'm only going to briefly touch on this today. And the reason is this is the topic of one of the segments that's going to be presented by the Small Business Administration. But I think it's important to talk about the fact that it is still a tool in the quiver of any good bond agent that says there is something called the Small Business Association Surety Bond Guarantee Program. And essentially the way it works, and I've worked in the past with brokers that are involved in this, that are approved to work with the SBA, is that what happens is you'll find we'll do the application process in the very beginning, and essentially what we're doing is you're applying twice. You apply first to a bond company that says, here's the project, this is the need. Maybe it's a bond that is, well, okay, I've seen it done where we were able to do a bond $1 million higher than we could have done without the Surety Bond Guarantee Program, because the SBA looks at your equity a little differently than a straight bonding company. They look at your work on hand differently. They are slightly more liberal in how they approach a deal. And in this case, a surety will say, yes, I will do this project, but only if there's an SBA bond guarantee in place. If there is, yes, we'll do it. So essentially what you're doing is applying twice. Now it is the SBA, and they are thorough as the devil, as we would very much expect. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But they've also committed to fast track any work that comes in on this basis. So yes, it will take a little time, but they've agreed to fast track it. And as such, you using this program may very well involve getting you a bond larger than you could have gotten on your own without taking this approach. Again, I don't want to steal anyone's thunder in this. What I really want to do is just say it's a tool. It can be used very satisfactorily, and it's a welcome tool to have available to us. Next slide. Okay, so this is phase 2 or option 2 or whatever you want to call it. The way I would suggest that if somebody's interested in doing public work and is interested in being able to bid public work jobs, that what we want to do is let's see if we can qualify you ahead of time. Now, first thing everybody needs to know, other than the fact that it is some work, it's free. We're not gonna be charging you for doing this. And if you think about it, I said that in the beginning, this is a zero loss proposition. And by that, I mean, nobody's ever gonna, there's no surety out there that I know of that'll ever issue a bond if they say, well, he's a hell of a nice guy, you know, maybe we'll, no, it doesn't work that way. They're gonna do it based on the facts that are in hand. So they're not expecting claims. What they are expecting is to expend money to investigate, to review, to pay the people that have to investigate and review this to determine who are the candidates we want to work with. And believe me, they're not looking at doing just one job. They want to see, you know, they're looking to do a lot of jobs. They're looking to grow with a contractor. They may say, well, okay, we'll take a chance on this one, but when it works, they're looking forward to a real string of business. And that gets reflected in premiums, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, it's free to go through this. Yes, it is absolutely work. It is sitting down with your CPA. That may not be free with you. But what you want to do is you're going to be putting together your financial reports. You're going to be putting together an application just as if you were applying. They're going to want to know your work on hand. They're going to want to look at your debt to equity ratio. They're going to want to look at how deeply you're into a bank line of credit, if you're even into it at all. And it's going to take time to do this. Just as if you had a project going, it's going to take a little time to do this. But your back isn't up against the wall. You're not stressed out and flatlining because you've got a bid spec you've got to get in by Friday. So to me, it makes the most sense to approach it this way. Now, will every agent take this approach? I don't know. I'm not every agent. I know we do it regularly, but your agent most likely is interested. He knows you. He's the one you've been working with. You want to go to him with that request first and take his approach, see what he can do for you in that, and apply out there to see, well, what your bonding abilities are. Next slide. What's the process? The process is you do the applications, you provide the financial reports, you give me all of the numbers, the social security numbers, all the dates of birth, all the stuff for everybody. And we get this stuff together. We decide which way we're going to go. Can we go directly to some bond companies that we have immediately available to us? Do we want to go to a bond specialty brokerage that has many, many, many companies to look at? It all depends on the situation you present. We match what you've given us with the profile of the bonding companies that are out there. The big ones, the big guys get to go to the big companies, and the newbies, we get to hook up with the companies that want to look at newbies, to grow a newbie into something that they know they can have a good relationship. You will find that once you start a relationship with a bonding company, they're going to want to love you, and you're going to want to love them, because they're the most important tool you have to getting the work you know that you can do. So we're going to take a look at all this stuff. We give it to the companies, and please remember, it takes a little time. Sooner you start, the sooner you're going to get the answers that you're looking for. Now, I just have to jump into one quick note here. I've heard it said, well, heck, I can bid this job. Why don't you Chuck, get all that application out to those bonding companies. Yeah, whatever you call them, underwriters, whatever, all that surety baloney. Anyway, I'm going to bid the job with my check because I can bid it with a 5% check. I highly recommend against that. And I recommend that because, if you bid it with a check, it's just as if you're saying I bid it with a check. But if I get this job, I am going to I'm going to do it to the bid price, and I'm going to provide a performance and a payment bond. Well, if you can't get one, you've soiled the nest. You can't complete the job. They're going to have to rebid it all over again. You're going to create issues with that. You're never going to end up getting a job with those folks again. So I really highly recommend that you do not bid with a check. I'm going to leave it at that. Do not bid a job with a check. You'll do that with a bid bond. It's the company that's going to provide you with a performance bond that will be presenting the bid bond, which is free to you to present along with your bid. Next slide. Okay, well, here's another C, but it's a very, very important one, and that's commitment. As I said when we first started, and we're pretty much wrapping up here, but when we first started, I said the surety company is guaranteeing that the job's going to be done and everybody's going to get paid. Well, the commitment you will make to the bonding company that's providing the bid bond, the performance bond, and the payment bond is that you are going to present to them a signed general indemnity agreement. Industry, we call it a GIA. And I will say with full conviction, no GIA, no bond. And what that is that every nickel that a bond company has to pay out if a bond is called will be reimbursed by the contractor that presented the bond. So a general indemnity agreement is signed by certainly by the officers of the corporation, the owners of the corporation. It's going to be signed by them corporately. It's going to be signed by them personally. And the spouses of those folks will also be signing corporately if they're corporate officers, and personally in order to get the bond. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I've had situations where I was not able to provide a bond because the owners of the corporation were unwilling to have their spouses sign personally. And they certainly made a good argument. I've set up a corporation. I've been successful for many, many years. And I set up a corporation to protect my family and to protect my home. And as such, there's no way that they're going to sign personally. Well, they didn't get the bond. And I'm not going to say that bonds were never issued that didn't have the spouses sign. And I can say with confidence that if you've been doing 100 to 200 million a year in bonding, and you've got a track record of over 20 years, I think there are some situations where a surety will not require a spouse to sign. But unless you've got that track record, and unless you've got that sort of history and size, everybody signs the general indemnity agreement, or the bond is not issued. It's the only tool that the surety company has to assure that they're going to be repaid if something awful happens that no one is expecting. The results, next slide, please. We all hope for a positive outcome when we do this application process. We've gone through a lot of work. We've gone through a lot of sweat. We've done some work with banks. We've done some work with the CPA. We've done a lot of work putting this all together. We may have talked to numerous bonding underwriters. We may have had to provide additional information to these folks. And not always does it work. It works a lot. It works most of the time. The first is always the hardest. Can't get beyond that. It's true. But good things will come out of it in any event, because a no now doesn't mean no forever. And it may mean that you have to perhaps change your accounting method. You may have to change the way in which you provide your financial statements. You may have to get your house in order as far as where you are with your line of credit. You may have to change your, in the old days, when you ran a corporation, you ran it so there was no money left over. That doesn't work when you're doing bonding. Bonding underwriters look to see capital left in the corporation, because you're going to need that capital to see you through those times when maybe the money isn't forthcoming when you need it, and you've got to be able to get this job done. So good things still will come out of it, because you're going to learn more about your company and what you need to do to be able to be bonded, if that's going to be the direction you want to go in. Next slide, I think.
Sure. Before we get to the next slide, we just have a question in the chat about, in general, how long does the approval process take?
For a small job that can be done on somebody's credit report, less than a week. Again, remember, did I say start small? A bond of some size with a project that is going to take some time, with a contractor that has a fair amount of work on hand, and we have to look at all those things. A couple weeks is not unreasonable. My experience, never less than a week, a couple of weeks, depending on what we're doing. I will say it varies every time, but still, it's going to take longer than you wish. If I say that, I'm being honest. It's going to take longer than you think it should. And if I may also say, in today's COVID world, where the new abnormal, I like to call it, where people do not work in offices anymore, that people are working in silos alone and trying to get together to coordinate a review of something like this, where they're not all working in the same floor of the same building. It does take longer than it did. Okay, what do bonds cost? Well, if you remember, I said, it's not what they cost, but can you get it? Now, bid bonds are free in almost every case that I've seen in recent memory. The cost of performance and payment bond fall in the 2 to 3% of the contract. But you need to know that you're going to put that bond premium in your bid. Okay, so really, yeah, you're going to write the check, but you're going to be reimbursed by the project owner of the general contract. He's the guy that's writing the check. So in one sense, it doesn't really cost you anything. So I will say that in the SBA Surety Guarantee Program, there is a small charge that is assessed for doing this, for providing the guarantee. It's not a very large charge, so you're going to be at the higher end of the 2 to 3% range. I will also say that those folks that have regular bonding operations that are, it's not like we're just reviewing this bond. If you're working with a bonding company and you're doing continuous bonding work, you are regularly providing financial statements. You are regularly providing updates on your work on hand. You're regularly providing where you are on your line of credit. You're regularly doing this. And as such, since it's part of a system or flow of information, you're going to be on the lower end of that contract amount. And really, the more you're doing, the more attractive you are to bonding companies and the less costly it's going to be to provide those bonds. And that's also a good thing, because remember I said you're going to put that bond premium in your bid? Well, if your bond premium is less than the next guy, well, that means you're a little more efficient and your bond may look a little more attractive than the next guy. So again, if you're going to work in this arena, providing the numbers and the information on a timely basis to the people that are asking for it will pay dividends in the end. That's my last slide. Well, it's not the last one. One more, Kristen. There's my last slide, and that's questions. So if there are more questions, please, please, please feel free to get them out now. Now, maybe if this is something where you've got to say, golly, I got to think about this. I know I got questions, but geez, I heard an awful lot in a short time. Please, my contact information is here. Kristen can get it to you if not, because I never mind questions about stuff like this. We're part of the Builders Association. Our goal is to help. Thank you. Thank you for your time. And if there's more questions, please send them along.
Thank you so much, Chuck. That was awesome. Very illuminating. You went over all of the questions I first had when we first met, when we were dreaming up this project. So I hope our audience found it just as illuminating. I'm sure they did. Yes, there is a question in the chat if the slides will be available. They will be. So I neglected to say at the outset of this session, all 3 sessions are going to be recorded, and all of the materials, the presentation materials from all 3 sessions are going to be sent along to everybody who registered. So of course, take notes if you wish. Yes, another question in the chat is if this is available in Spanish, and yes, it will be. So when you receive the recordings of these sessions, they will initially be in English because that's how Zoom records these sessions. The live interpretation is available now. You can use that. What we're going to be doing is having the transcripts from the recordings translated and put Spanish subtitles on so they can still be digested in Spanish. And then these presentation materials will also be translated into Spanish, and they will all be provided to everyone who registered. So whether you want to experience it again and again in English or in Spanish, you will have that opportunity. And if you're here, it means you registered. So it means you will get a copy of everything bilingually. I hope that answers any of those lingering housekeeping questions. Chuck has graciously agreed to stick around in the chat. So like he says, if you have questions or you're kind of trying to figure out how to phrase it, you can still go ahead and enter those in the chat, even though his portion of this evening's presentation is done. He will be hanging around in the chat to answer questions, and certainly we can share his contact information if anybody wants to have an offline discussion about bonding. John Marcantonio from Reba, I think we have resolved the technical issues we were having, I hope, and he would like to say a few words, so I'd like to invite him to take the digital mic.
Yeah, Kristen, thank you. I'm almost glad that I had some technical difficulties early on, because sticking around here to say hello, but to listen to Chuck's presentation, I got to tell you, that was very informative, Chuck. I learned a lot just listening to you, and you're down the hall from me most days on a non-COVID world, and maybe I should pay more attention to these things. That was excellent, and I hope folks, not just those who are on this Zoom, but the folks who watch it in the future, gather as much as I did from it. Just to be short, thank you so much to you and the secretary, Kristen, for allowing us to participate and having a confidence in our group to provide the information and resources to you all. We are certainly dedicated to that, and we'll continue to do whatever it takes to help the community and folks interested in these types of bidding opportunities to further the business. So, I learned a lot from Chuck. I'm going to stick around and listen to what David has to say, because between the two of them, I'm sure we're all going to learn a lot. So I'll leave it back to you, Chris. Thanks again for having us. And I guess now I'll let you introduce David.
Thanks so much, John. It's been a great partnership. We really enjoyed working with you, and I think we've created something pretty fantastic out of the partnership.